Hi class, it's Dr. Lindner. Welcome back. What we're going to be talking about now in this next short video are going to be the systems. Now, we know that cells come together. When cells come together, they make tissues, and when tissues come together, they make organs, and when organs come together, they make systems, and when systems come together, it makes the organism. And what makes the cells, if we think back, that's going to be your chemistry. That's going to be your chemistry. Carbons, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogens, etc. So when we talk about the systems, we're going to have 11 systems. When we look at the skeletal system, we'll give a little intro to it. It's made up of 206 bones, and all of them articulate with one another with the exception of one bone, and that's called the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is in the throat. It does not make a joint with any other bone. And the bones are really important because muscles are going to attach to them. And when muscles contract, they help mobilize the skeleton. But the skeleton also, if we think about it, and the way I teach it where I go over everything in the center first. And the center is what we call the appendicular skeleton. So I'll just abbreviate A for appendicular skeleton. And then we'll put an AP, P for appendicular. And then we'll focus on the upper extremities and the lower extremities. And that's called, oh, I'm sorry, look at me making a big boo-boo here. The extremities to the extremities, the upper and lower extremities, that's the appendicular skeleton. And the central part is called the axial skeleton. I'll repeat that. The axial skeleton is what we see here in the center. That's the axial skeleton. And then your upper extremity and lower limbs or lower extremity, that's going to be the appendicular skeleton. And if we think about the skull, well, it's protecting the brain. And when we think about the ribs, it's protecting the lungs. And if we think about the pelvis, it's protecting some of your lower digestive tract and your reproductive organs. We think of the spinal column, it's protecting your spinal cord. And bones act as a bank. What do I mean by a bank? A bank is like a reserve. It's a reserve. It stores a lot of minerals. So when you eat food, your body's going to utilize a lot of vitamins and minerals, and whatever is left over, it stores those minerals in the bone, like calcium and magnesium and iron and zinc. A lot of those minerals get stored in here. And then whenever your body needs more, it just goes in the bone. Like it goes to if you need more money, you go to the bank and take it out. Your innate intelligence can go in the bones and remove some of those minerals as needed. Okay, so the bones are very, very important. Our bodies can produce blood from the bone marrow inside your bone tissue, okay, inside this connective tissue. And again, remember, muscles attach here. Super important. When they contract, it mobilizes us. When we look at the neural system, I prefer the word neural instead of nervous system. We can also study it and review it kind of in a similar way to the way we approach the skeleton, where we focus on what's in the center first. And what we have in the center is called the central neural system, or the CNS, central neural system. And that's the brain and the spinal cord. What makes up the central neural system? Well, only two things: the brain and the spinal cord. Everything else that you see is part of what we call the peripheral neural system. Like all of these nerves are part of the peripheral neural system because they're in the periphery. And even off of the brain, we have nerves, and the nerves that come off of the brain, those are called cranial nerves. And there's 12 pairs of cranial nerves. When we do neurology, we'll get into those 12 cranial nerves and what their functions are. So the CNS is the central neural system. It's made up of the brain and spinal cord. If it's not the brain and it's not the spinal cord, anything else, anything outside of that is part of the peripheral neural system, like our nerves, whether they're spinal nerves or cranial nerves. And the control center is the brain and the spinal cord. That's the control center. The central neural system, in terms of its function, its primary job is to sense, it's to take information from the outside world and bring it in. So information from outside comes in and up into the brain, and that's sensory information. That's sensory information. And then when the brain receives the information, it sends it down like a down elevator and sends it out to different parts of the body. We call that motor information. So we have sensory nerves and we have motor nerves. Sensory is the up elevator, going up the spinal cord to the brain, and then going down is the motor neurons. Okay? All right, the respiratory system. Well, we know that what we're breathing in is oxygen, and that what we're pushing out is carbon dioxide, CO2. Now, the only reason that we breathe in oxygen, is so that this part of the cell, there's part of the cell that you will learn this week that looks like this, and it's called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria that most people have learned in the past, they say it's the powerhouse of the cell, but no one knows why it's referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. It's the powerhouse of the cell because it's producing energy, and the energy currency of the human body is called ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So the oxygen that we breathe in is going to be utilized by the mitochondria to produce fuel, to produce energy in the form of ATP. Okay? And the mitochondria needs a lot of important nutrients to do that, especially your B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, and it needs magnesium, and it needs iron. Very, very important nutrients, as well as CoQ10. That's what if you think about what happens if someone is deficient in iron, they have no energy, they're fatigued, they're tired. And that's because without iron, you can't make ATP. So the mitochondria is quite dependent, not just on oxygen, but a lot of vitamins and minerals to function properly. But that's the main reason why we breathe in oxygen. And as it makes ATP, the exhaust that the mitochondria gives off, that's the CO2. So this is taking in oxygen, and then what it's giving off is carbon dioxide that we exhale. Pretty cool. If we were to divide this, make this line right here, everything up here is the upper respiratory tract, and then everything below that is the lower respiratory tract. And you've heard of people that have upper respiratory tract infections and lower respiratory tract infections. Okay? So that's a little bit of the respiratory system and its primary function. Then when we breathe in that oxygen, we do need the circulatory system, right? The lungs and the heart work hand in hand, because the heart has the ability of pumping deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So the deoxygenated blood, meaning blood without oxygen, goes to the lungs. It picks up the oxygen. And then after it picks up the oxygen, it gets pumped back to the heart so that the heart can then pump all the oxygenated blood to different parts of the body. So when we do the cardiovascular system, we'll talk about oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood. because the heart is pumping oxygenated blood to all the main parts of the body, to your muscles, to your nervous system, to your heart, to your lungs, to your stomach, to your kidneys, to everything that needs energy, because that oxygen goes to the cells, to the mitochondria to produce energy so that all the parts of the body can work. But after the oxygen has been dumped, it's got to find a way back to the lungs to pick up more oxygen, to be pumped back to the heart so that the heart can repump more oxygen to all the parts of the body. Okay, so the circulatory system is not just pumping gases like oxygen or CO2, it's pumping nutrients, hormones. It's a super important system. It's not just the heart, but we'll be going over blood vessels as well. Then your body has to detoxify. And one of the organs that helps us detoxify is the liver, but also the kidneys. The kidneys are responsible for detoxification so that we can eliminate waste products. The kidneys are also not just important when it comes to detoxification, but it's involved with the heart function in regulating blood pressure. It's also important in making vitamin D for us. Without the kidneys, we can't produce vitamin D. And the kidneys are also monitoring our electrolytes in the body. If there's too much calcium, we can get rid of it. If there's too much hydrogen, it can get rid of it. The kidneys are really important in what we call acid-base balance. Acid-base balance, which is very important in terms of pH, managing potential hydrogen or percentage hydrogen, which is when something is too acidic or too basic. And simply put, if we look at a scale from 0 to 14, right in the middle is 7. Anything from 0 to 7 is an acid, and anything above 7 to 14 is a base. And just to give you an idea, right around here at, let's say, 7.4, that's where your blood pH is. So the blood pH is slightly basic or slightly alkalinic. And if we look at the stomach pH is around 2.3, which is acidic. And we need acids in the stomach to digest our food. So the body is always monitoring and looking at what the pH is, and it has all these different systems involved in keeping the body in a very, very tight pH. And every organ and different tissues has its own pH. Okay, don't buy into the concept that people think you could drink pH water and change the entire pH of your body to prevent cancer, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense. Okay, you can't change the pH of your entire body. It's just impossible to happen. Okay, the digestive system. Well, the digestive system is divided and has main organs, and then it has accessory organs. So the main organs would be like your stomach, your small intestines, your large intestine. Those would be your esophagus. That's like your main organs. But then you have secondary or accessory organs, like in your mouth, we have salivary glands. We have the liver. The liver, that's an accessory gland. We have, hiding over here, the pancreas. We have the gallbladder. Those are all accessory organs, meaning they're part of the digestive process. Okay, they're not the main organs because food is not passing directly through those passageways, but they are making digestive enzymes that are needed to break down the food. So the only reason why we eat, again, we eat carbs, proteins, fats for the sole purpose of having oxygen work on those nutrients that we can produce ATP, and the preferred fuel is glucose. Okay. When we talk about the integumentary system, the integument is everything on the outside that protects us. Your skin, your hair, your nails. So skin, hair, nails, that's all part of the integumentary system. It's like your first line of defense, that barrier of your immune system. And the skin, when we talk about the integumentary system, the skin is one of the first organs that we will talk about because it's made up of all four tissue types. It's made up of epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nerve tissue. Epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nerve tissue is found throughout the skin. And when I go over the skin with you, we'll go over the different layers of the skin and even the microscopic layers of the skin. And I have really good videos on my YouTube channel for that. The endocrine system is another control system like the neural system. The neural system controls and coordinates all the functions of the body, and it does so in harmony with the endocrine system. So we'll talk about the different glands that we have in the brain, like the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. We'll talk about the thyroid gland and the thymus gland and the pancreas and the kidneys. And above the kidneys, we have the adrenal glands. And then we have reproductive organs like the testes and the ovaries. And what you'll notice is that although the testes and the ovaries are part of the reproductive system, they're also an integral part of the endocrine system because they make hormones. And although the kidneys are part of the urinary system, they have secretory cells that produce hormones. Although the pancreas is an accessory organ of the digestive tract, it makes hormones. The adrenals make hormones. The thymus is part of the immune system that makes hormones. The pituitary and pineal gland are part of the neural system, but they make hormones. Even the heart, it's not showing it, but even the heart produces hormones. It can regulate its own blood pressure. It's just brilliant. Okay, the muscular system, when we do the muscles, we'll cover it by doing all the axial muscles, and then we'll focus on the appendicular muscles, the upper and lower extremities. Muscles contract, they generate heat. For us, you ever notice that when you have a fever, if your hypothalamus in your brain, which is responsible for your body temperature, if your hypothalamus by itself can't increase your body temperature to spike a fever, then your muscles will contract, they'll shiver, you'll feel cold, and you'll feel hot as a result because they generate heat and you'll sweat. Fascinating how the innate intelligence of the body can do that. When we talk about muscles, we have smooth muscle, we have cardiac muscle, and then we have skeletal muscle. We have smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and skeletal. When we cover muscles in a separate week, we're going to be focusing primarily on skeletal muscles, which are muscles that attach to your skeleton and that you have conscious voluntary control over. When we talk about the lymphatic system, this is a big part of your immune system. We have the spleen. We have the thymus. You have lymph nodes all throughout your body. You have bone marrow. These are all part of the lymphatic system. In fact, in your bone marrow, this is where we produce B cells. And from the thymus, that's where we produce T cells. So when you hear of B cells and T cells, that gives you a pretty good idea as to where these come from. Okay, the only other system that's not covered here that isn't shown is the reproductive, which is the male and female reproductive tract, but that we'll go over much later in the course. Okay, so here on Connect, this has shown up in the past. So if we look at what's highlighted in blue, what do we have here in the center? Well, we know that the appendicular is going to be the upper and lower extremities. Peripheral skeleton, I never spoke about a peripheral skeleton. The only time you heard me use the word peripheral was when we talked about the PNS and the CNS, the central neural system and peripheral neural system, but that's neurology. Central skeleton, I never used the term, but axial skeleton I did. So everything in blue is the axial skeleton. You can see it's the skull, spine, sternum, ribs, sacrum. Everything is axial. Everything outside of that, that's tan, that is part of the appendicular skeleton. Okay, now we're looking at what's in blue. Well, even though we haven't done any muscles yet, by process of elimination, the rectus abdominis, well, that's this. So it can't be that. Axial muscles, we know axial refers to everything here in the center, so it can't be that. Oblique, well, that means like on a diagonal, well, those would be these, abdominal obliques, so it can't be that. So the only thing left that's highlighted in blue are the appendicular muscles. Okay, now we're looking at what is blue, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and we know that the brain and the spinal cord is the central neural system, and that happens to be the control center. So if we look at, we don't see CNS or central neural system here. In terms of removing waste, well, those are the kidneys. Connecting to muscles, well, not the best answer. If it was these, the yellow ones, those connect to muscles. Destroying foreign invaders, well, that's the lymphatic system. So the brain and the spinal cord is Houston control. It is the control center. When we have information coming up, remember that's sensory information. And when we have information that starts in the brain, goes down the spinal cord and out, that's motor information. Sensory information, ascends, and motor information descends, meaning it goes down. Another word for sensory information is called afferent. And another word for motor information is efferent. Okay, now we look here. We're looking at these glands, which are part of the endocrine system, but it's pointing to this blue one right here. If it was the adrenals would be there. See the word renal? Renal means kidney. Add means you're adding something to it. So the adrenals are above the kidneys. Liver, it's not even showing the liver, but the liver, if it was here, it would be right there. That would be the liver, so it can't be that. Kidneys, it can't be, because these are the kidneys. So the blue is the pancreas. That's the pancreas. Here, in the throat, that's your thyroid in the front. And if we look at it from the back, which is posterior, means the backside, we could see these four things. Those four things are called the parathyroid. And then here, these are the ovaries in the female. This is the uterus. These are the fallopian tubes. And those are the ovaries. Okay, now here, aorta, thymus, trachea are heart. So the blue structure, that should be give me, that would be the heart. If it was the aorta, that's this large red blood vessel right there. That's the aortic arch. Thymus, that's part of the endocrine system. And trachea, you can't see. That would be the windpipe, but you can't see that. Okay, so now we're looking at the respiratory tract. Remember, everything above here is upper respiratory tract, and everything below is the lower respiratory tract. So the choices are pharynx, nasal cavity, throat, or upper respiratory tract. So everything above the larynx, which is right here, the voice box, everything above that in blue, that's the upper respiratory tract. Okay, now we're looking at the digestive tract. And simply put, if let's say here's the esophagus, We'll put an E for esophagus, then we'll have a stomach. Then everything in the center right here is the small intestine. And the small intestine, I typically say it's the picture surrounded by a picture frame. So the picture frame is the large intestine. Okay, so you have the esophagus, stomach, small intestine is the picture, and the picture frame, framing it in, is the large intestine. So when we look at everything here in the center, that's the small intestine. And then the small intestine is surrounded by the picture frame. That's going to be the large intestine. Here's your liver. That's your liver right there. And there's your stomach right there. All right, now we're still looking at the digestive tract, and it's looking at the parotid gland right here. It's looking at the tongue. It's looking at the liver. It's looking at the pancreas, and it's looking at the gallbladder. Now, remember, if it's the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine, and large intestine, then that's the digestive tract. But these secondary organs that help the process, those are accessory digestive organs. Okay, good place for our next break. When we come back, we'll talk about some anatomical reference terms.